Good evening, everybody. I've just realised I must have knocked this screen somewhere. Let me just... There we go. I think. I don't know. Anyway, I'll try and sort that out in a second. How are we all doing? It is Sunday, the 23rd of January, 2022. This is the Sunday night pod and shed chat that we do every week. And we're back here in the pod and shed. What have you been up to in your own allotments and gardens? We'll go through that in just a second. We've got a few videos to get through tonight, and the main subject that we're going to be discussing, sort that out, is about making compost. So get your tips ready for that. I'll go through what I've been up to over this last week, but first of all, let's see if anybody is out there. Ballycillian is out there. Good evening to you, Rich. Good evening, Richard. Has anyone heard how Adrian's wife got on at hospital last week? I haven't heard anything. I'm hoping he's going to let us know. Oracle, hello, Veg Grower Army, and I hope all is well with my friend Adrian and his wife. We've been praying for you, Matt, indeed. Turbo Stream, good evening, Veg Growers Army. Good evening to you. Rebecca Hawkins, good evening to you. Anna Jones has joined. Good evening to you. Hargrave Gas. Evening, everyone. Sorry I missed last week. I watched it during the week, though. Great as ever. Lovely to see you. Sean O'Brien. Evening, all. Good evening to you. Cornish Heaven. Good evening to you. Stuart Jackson. Evening, Richard and the Veg Grower Army. Good evening, all. Andrew Norris, making compost is a subject I need. Built a compost structure last year and hope it produces good results. Indeed. Alison Whelan is doing. Good evening to you. I wonder if I put the structure in the wrong place in the shade. We'll find out a little bit later on about that. And Digwell, hi all, just finished making a chicken and cashew nut nom nom. Nice. Sounds nice. I've just actually had my dinner, which was also just as interesting. It was a chicken and rhubarb curry, which sounds weird, but it was a really nice sweet and sour combination. Really nice, actually. I'm going to make it again one day, and I will eat it live on the show and make a video up. Really nice. Big coat on. Does that mean no heat tonight? Well, you can probably hear the heater on down below. No, I've just got a big coat on because I've had the house door open all day and it was a little bit cold. Turbo Stream, I'm still laughing at the nosy kid in the camper van video. Yes, so I have a new YouTube channel based around, it's called Nuggets Van Life. Just around, it's not gardening, which is why I've done it on a separate channel, but it's for my camping van video sort of thing. Nuggets Van Life, that is. Rebecca, wow, that sounds amazing. I'm guessing it's either Digwell's chicken and cashew nut nom nom or my chicken and rhubarb nom nom. Really nice, actually. Toby Spring, it's been a big coat week in Birmingham. Indeed, it has been pretty chilly down here as well. Now, what have I been up to this week? I was actually hoping this week to be able to get to the allotment a bit more during the week because, well, I knew I had a busy weekend this weekend. So, unfortunately, I thought work was going to be pretty quiet this week. It wasn't that case. I didn't get down the allotment that much. I did go down there Friday evening, just as it was sort of light and starting to get dark. Excuse me. Dug up fruit, Jerusalem artichokes, dug up a few other bits and pieces, and had a great evening down there, actually. Yesterday, I took a trip up to Essex to see our good friend Lee Connolly, and I'm actually aching from it. I was helping him rip out some tree stumps from his garden, which, it's quite achy now, but I did it. That's the main thing. And then today, I've had a bit of, because I've been achy, I've had a bit of a sowing session here. I've been sowing a lot more chilies, a lot more sweet potatoes, sweet peppers, celery, celeriac, Then a few I can think of off the top of my head. Basically, it's been a pretty busy week, or busy week, as busy as I can make it with the weather that we've had. Let me know what you guys have been up to in your own allotments and gardens in the comments, or you can zap in, or let me add the link in the chat. Or you can zap in on the link going up in the chat, or let me add the banner. Which one is it? We'll add it across the bottom. 07307 135 174 if you want to zap it or call in, sorry. So, let's have a look. Digwell is saying, rhubarb is very underrated in dishes. It is much more than a rhubarb crumble ingredient. I agree. Really nice in this sweet and sour dish, the chicken we made today. I thought it was really nice. Anyway, needed a bit of honey and a bit of lime, but really nice. It's been duvet time in Cornwall, no heating. Oh, I don't think I could survive without heating, in all honesty. I do like my heating. I've got heating down here for that very reason. Is nom nom a southern thing? Don't know of them up north. Nom nom is just an expression of eating tasty food, I think. It's not really a dish that I'm aware of, just unless I'm wrong with what Digwell was saying, but nom nom is normally like you're eating nom 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 nom. There we go. Chicken and rhubarb, what an interesting combination. Recipe, please. Just a general outline, please. I like mixing meats with fruits, but never thought of that combination. So what I did today, I took a kilo of chicken thighs, took the skin off, and then just browned them on both sides. Pop the chicken thighs in a separate dish. Into the pan that I cooked the chicken thighs in, I've added 2 chopped onions and 4 chopped garlic cloves. Sweated those down for about 5 minutes. Then I added some 2 tablespoons of turmeric and a can of chopped tomatoes. Cooked that for about 2-3 minutes, stirring constantly. Then I added back the chicken, added in 5 tablespoons of honey, the rhubarb, and I added about 1 kilo of chopped rhubarb. That's for my freezer. What else went to it? Juice of 1 lime and some chicken stock, and then I just sort of brought that to the boil and then simmered it for 2 hours, served with rice. Absolutely delicious. Again, I'll try and make a proper recipe up next time because it was really nice. Turbo Stream, the only gardening thing of note this week was to dig up a few parsnips. Most of them were forked. Did they taste good though? Did they taste good? Could you write the name of your channel, please? Yeah, okay. It's going up in the comments now. Like I say, this is not a gardening channel, which is why I've done it on a separate one. It's just really a bit of fun for the van life video. Evening from Ian. Good evening to you. Andrew is dead jealous of Turbo Stream's parsnips. I know Andrew has a lot of trouble with parsnips in his garden. Rhubarb and apple crumble this afternoon from last year's pickings. Adrian has joined. Good evening to you. Adrian, we've been wondering, how is your wife after what happened last weekend? Hope you are well, my friend. I did better last year, Andrew, with that. Okay. Ian has been sowing microgreens of radish and chit in my potatoes, plus dug up carrots in my pots. Indeed. What else have we got? I sowed a few lamb's lettuce seeds this afternoon. Lovely. Do like lamb's lettuce. I tried to start my supply of leaves off to eat as well. I do like lamb's lettuce. Yeah. Nom nom is how you spell the sound of me eating. Yeah, exactly. What else? What else we got? So Andrew's going to try that recipe I just quickly spelled out. It is delicious, I've got to say. Anybody else? Everyone. Cornish Evan. Frog spawned in my garden pond and some in the grass. I had to rescue it and pot in the pond. Is it frog spawn time? I suppose it is, yeah. Adrian, update. Had horrendous week, been doing lots on the farm. How's your wife though, Adrian? That's what we collected wife at 1:30 Monday. Not full of heart attack, but all symptoms all week, in pain whenever moves from bed and rest, diagnosed angina. Sees heart consultant tomorrow morning. Use GTN spray constantly. Well, I'm pleased to hear that she's not that it's nothing too serious or what have you. I'm pleased to see that everything is on the mend. So yeah, we were worried about you, Adrian. We were worried about you and your wife. Graham, I've been making compost for 5 years, always the same way as Mick Poultney, works well every time. Well, on that note, I think we should actually know. I have got a video that has came in from Philly, who I'm not sure if these videos are in any particular order, so I'm just going to play them, and we'll come back to composting.
Hello, Richard. Just a wee clip to let you know what's happening. Very short this week, just show you. I'm going to plant a few onion sets here. So I sieved me compost to get myself a nice fine mix. And then I like to add a wee bit of vermiculite to the mix. Not a lot, just a wee bit, just to sort of keeps us nice and loose. And then because these onion sets are going to be in these pots, you actually should plant them in smaller pots, but these are going to be in these pots for a wee while. Probably till end of April, maybe May. I like to put a wee handful, just a blood fishing bone in it, just to give them a wee bit of goodness to grow on. So that's basically my mix. Now fill one of my seed trays up, one here filled. Then I come to selecting the onion sets. So the likes of that there, nice shoulder on it. Make sure there's no loose material at the top. And just gently press them in. Because you've sieved the compost, you can do no harm till the set. And so forth. And just continue on till you get the tray filled. Wee bit of loose on it, so just clean it off and press them in. And just continue on till you get the tray filled. As you can see, they're just pressing in. It's lovely, it's sieved, so it's lovely and soft. You're not doing any damage to anything. Now whenever I get this filled, just another couple to go. Almost there. Right. Now I'll continue on and fill all this up, and then for watering, I like watering from the bottom. So these wee trays, fill these trays in and just fill up with water, and as soon as you see it coming, changing colour, you know it's completely watered, and that's it. I don't water from the top. Thank you.
There we go. That was actually, as I accidentally said Philly. I meant to say Ballycillian. Philly sends them to me, but Ballycillian was the one in that video, and his videos. What fantastic little video showing us how he plants his onions. Bloodfish and bone, fantastic thing to add to many onions when growing it. And actually, it's given me an idea watching that. I've got a few onion sets that I need to get in, but I haven't actually got the beds built. So I'm gonna copy that idea and start them off in trays, just to get a little bit of a head start. So thank you very much for that. I did adjust this slightly, and I'm going to adjust it again. There we go. It'll probably move back in a second, but that's better. So yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much. And as Turbo Stream says, you know your onions, Ballycillian. We've got a couple more videos coming up from Ballycillian a little bit later on. Let's just have a quick look at the updates. Turbo Stream is thanking for the update to Adrian and wish her well from the Veg Army. Indeed, please do. And well, not as serious as a heart attack, but she cannot do anything without having stabbing pains, even laying down. Hence me doing lots more. I feel totally fed up. Well, Adrian, we're all here for you. If there's anything we can do, then please let us know. I know it's not pleasant, so fingers crossed everything gets better for you in a not too distant future. So, composting. Now, this is something that does come up quite often. And how do we make the best compost? And I've got my own method that I've been doing for a number of years. And my method is I've developed from a lot of trial and error, and I've kind of learned that in order to produce good standard of compost, you need a few things. You need good mix of materials, so your greens and your browns. You need something to store it in, the compost bin, and chop it up small, because that way it rots down quicker and it produces a lot more heat. So I want to start with what we use to store the compost in. Now, some people don't have a compost bin at all. They'll just throw the materials down in a heap and add it and build it up from that. That works fine. I personally prefer to have it in a container. One, because I find it keeps it a little bit tidier, keeps it all in the same place. But two, it also holds on to the heat as it rots down. Now, when I first built my compost bin on the allotment, I just did the standard 3 pallets to make a U shape, and that worked fine for a number of years. And I actually placed these behind my shed, somewhat shady, because I figured it's going to be better to have it growing in the shade, or have the compost bins in the shade, than it is having it out in the full sun, because I want the full sun for the plants. And I think it was, who was it? Andrew was asking a bit earlier about whether or not it's worth growing things, or whether it's okay his compost bin in the shade. From my experience, it is fine in the shade. My compost bins at home, which are your standard Dalek bins, they are actually alongside the fence, which is in shade as well, and it does work fine in the shade. I think it would be quicker if it is in the full sun, but I produce compost pretty quick. So yeah, down on the allotment, I started off with a 3 pallets compost bin, making a U shape. It worked fine, but it did rot away after a few years. Back at home, I've had the standard plastic Dalek compost bins, which I just think they're a little bit on the messy or the ugly side these days. I do prefer the look of wood, in all honesty. What I'm going to be doing down on the allotments, and I'm meant to do this over winter, is actually build some new compost bins out of wood, just to tidy things up. I want to add a lid, so I've got somewhere on top to place things and close things down and hold on to some of that moisture, which is, again, why Dalek bins work quite well, because they hold on to that moisture that the steam generates. And added to that, something that I do at home, and I've spoken about this quite a few times, I've got my wormery where I put all my kitchen waste, which also produces compost. Excuse me. But I've also got my sub pod, which is something I've spoken about several times. The sub pod is basically an underground composting system. And I love this at home. I'm going to get several of them, because what I found is that they just look a little bit tidier because you don't see the compost bins themselves. And because it's underground, all the nutrients do leach out into the soil, into the beds. And it doubles up as quite a nice, comfortable seat to sit on when I need to sit down with a nice cuppa and look at the garden. So compost bins are probably the first place to start. What is everybody else using for their compost bins? I'll put that out there to start off with, and let's go back through the comments and see what is happening. So Rebecca is saying to keep strong, Adrian. Hi, Adrian. Sorry, just watching the news. Okay. Is it better to cover a compost bin, Richard, from TurboStream? It is better, I find, because it holds on to that heat and that steam and that moisture a little bit better. However, if you do cover it, you've got to remember to water it. But I also, my open ones, I like to grow pumpkins in when it comes to pumpkin growing time. I'll explain a little bit later on that later on. It is better if you're just using it just solely for composting. But if you use it for other things, then not so much. Ambulance team in the hospital said we did the right thing in calling them. Indeed you did. Indeed you did. Hi Adrian, please, they worked out. So what is up with your lovely wife? Hopefully you'll get it sorted ASAP. Fingers crossed for you, Adrian. I think we're all there. What have we got? My problem with making compost is finding enough material. Started to add egg boxes, etc. now. I'll come to that in a second, actually, when we talk about the material. I've done a lot of sowing again this week. More aubergines, chilies and peas. My compost is dry. Should I leave the lid off for a few days? What I'm going to sow, we'll get into that in a little bit in a minute, actually. I've been chucking grass clippings and cardboards with some woody stuff on the compost heap for 2 years now. Never dug it over or anything. Will it be okay? It will be okay, but you will want to turn it around every now and then if you want to use that compost in your garden particularly. High-grade gas. Compost. Can you really put all your Amazon brown cardboard boxes in labels as well? Yes, you can. Again, that's something we'll get into in just a second. Once I've gone through his comments, we'll go through the materials that we can go in. Security in hospital would let me in because I did not have a mask till they saw my exemption card. Yeah, I can understand that with everything going on, but I think this week restrictions end, so it may all change. Stuart Jackson, my compost bins at home are plastic, but at school we have a pallet 1/6 plastic and a compost ball, which the children's roll around the field. So the compost bin, that's an interesting point, actually. That was another type of compost bin I was hoping somebody was going to mention and talk about. So I've got some temporary compost bins somewhere that I brought from Wilkinson's that you fill up and you can roll them around. And I've also seen for sale some of the big plastic compost bins that also are easy to rotate around. And the idea here is that every now and then you do want to mix your compost up, and by rotating them, it mixes them up quite nicely. It allows air to get into the mixture. At home, I have two Dalek bins. Never yet got the heat to heat up. I'll come to that in a second. That's good to know from Andrew. I tucked my compost structure out of the way, but it is in the shade most of the year. I was concerned that it would not generate enough heat, but now I'm reassured somewhat. I'm going off my experience. I think they would do better in the sun, but I find in the shade, providing you produce the compost correctly, they get so hot. It's actually quite amazing just how hot compost bins get. Yeah. I'm going to do this too from now on, Digwell. What was that? About the materials. I'll come to that in a second, like I said. The big compost bins at the allotment are mostly full of leaves from the bottom gate. Well, there you go, Thomas. You've got a supply of leaves. Which leaves, I think when they've fallen off and they've gone brown, are brown materials, which is what quite often it's difficult to get hold of. My bin is a black square plastic one. I've just started off a wormery. I think you were the one that asked about wormeries recently, wasn't you? The big plastic ones, I mean, I like the big plastic ones. I think square compost bins are more efficient for space type of things. Whereas the round ones, or the Dalek style ones that I've got, I don't think they make efficient use of the space because they sort of create like a cone. I'd sooner have it the same size all the way up. What else says? I have a powerful shred at home where we shed all our Amazon packaging and add to compost. I create a lot of compost for the home allotment, 4 to 6 meters cubed. And, well, yeah. So Yeah, so materials, as Grow Veg was hinting at, and a few questions we came into. Now, I do not have a huge amount of problem in finding enough materials to fill my compost bins up. What I probably have more problem is that I probably have too much material that I could do with more compost bins and therefore need more space. So, what do I add to my compost bins? Lawn clippings are quite a large thing that I do use. That's the green material. Anything that was once living is what I use. So all my plants, my prunings, they all go in. Wood, especially from prunings and things, that will go in there. Leaves, manure if you can get hold of it. Wood chip, which I get from my chickens. Straw, which I also get from my chickens. What else have we got? Cardboard. Somebody was asking about Amazon packaging. Amazon actually uses compostable materials, and the inks are a vegetable-based ink, so they all go in there really nicely as well. Cardboard, as much cardboard as you can get hold of. Again, it's that brown material that I find is the hardest thing to get hold of plenty of in huge amounts, because the green materials, which is like your grass clippings, your vegetative growth, anything that basically if you cut it would die back to nothing, is your green material. Brown materials would be wood, cardboard, egg boxes, things like that. That all goes in, and you need about an equal balance of your green and browns. Now, what I'd like to do personally, I find that very difficult to try and keep them all separate until you need it. So what I tend to do, I get all my materials and I either run it through the shredder in a case of branches and things like that, or I will run over it with the lawnmower, especially with grass and stuff, obviously. And that chops everything up really nice and small. What I find, because it's chopped up nice and small, and the lawnmower just naturally picks it up into the bag for me as well, which makes life a lot easier. It mixes up really well, and it goes into the compost bin really nicely and easy to get in. But more importantly, because it's chopped up nice and small, it heats up quickly and produces compost a lot quicker because it's nice and small. I could, in the middle of summer, I could produce compost in as little as 3 months just by the fact that I chop everything up and I keep it in the black plastic Dalek style bins. So yeah, materials that go in is I think one thing that a lot of people do have a lot of struggle with trying to find the materials. I have the attitude anything that's compostable goes into my compost bins now. We actually found that we throw very little waste out since doing this. Old clothes can go in the compost bin if they're made of cotton, various things like that. So Andrew has said, I thought the sun may help. Well, I thought that, but the sun must help a little at least. Thanks for the advice. Oh yeah, Digwell said it's the compost heap that makes the heat, not the sun. The sun does help a little, but it does, because everything, when it rots down, produces heat itself. It makes life a lot easier. What else have we got? I intend to try and layer the material this year and turn it. I think the layering is a good way to do it, but I find it difficult to do because you've then got to keep everything separate. I'd sooner just chop everything up and throw it all in together. Just my way makes life easy for me. I have a huge of wood chip. I think that pile, possibly 8 ton. Steams well, will have plenty of brown waste that I can use for compost. So there you go. Yeah, wood chip. If you can get hold of a lot of wood chip, 8 ton is a lot. You will actually find it steaming quite often anyway, as it is, and even hot on the inside. So that is what you want to mix in with your green waste as well if you want to produce compost. I like to use wood chip on floors, of course, but yeah, if you can get 8 ton of it, you actually see it steaming. It's quite amazing just how much steam comes off it. Same as horse manure. If you see that going, it's quite high, quite a lot of steam that comes out of that. I've heard that is a good strategy at Turbo Stream. What was that? Oh yeah, it's the layering and trying to turn it. Yeah, I'll come to that in a minute. I use old council wheelie bins that I've lined them up the outside side, shaded side of a polytunnel. It's surprising the heat comes off them and also heats the polytunnel. Now that's a very good point. The heat that is produced by composting. Many years ago, I saw there was a greenhouse that had a compost bin attached and used the heat from the compost bin to heat the greenhouse. Unfortunately, I've not seen it since. I don't know if it still exists, but it's certainly something I like the idea of. And I tried putting a compost heap inside my greenhouse for that very reason. I hope I can improve this, Andrew. That's yeah. Good evening from Ernie. Trust you and Amanda are well. It's been very mild this week, so much so I wanted to cut the grass but never had the time. Yeah, it has been. We've had cold mornings, but it has been pretty mild during the day, and the grass is actually getting long. Certainly seen the grass glow, I've got to say. Is it good to compost walnut leaves? I asked because of the tannin content. So this has been something I hear people say to avoid certain leaves, such as walnut. Personally, I would throw it in, but just make sure you've got a lot of other materials to balance it out. I've not had a huge amount of walnut leaves to really share that experience with, but I personally think it is okay. Oh yeah, I've read that one. We have a lot of wood chip at school. Can we mix that with all the other composting? Yes, you can. Wood chip is a great thing. If you can get hold of it in large quantities and you can add it to your grass clippings, it does produce some fantastic compost. I do the same with compost materials, and the compost heap is steaming hot and teeming with red wrigglers. I have to do a video for you all. Please do. Yeah, it'd be great to see that video. And I agree, chop everything up small and the compost heap does get steaming hot. What have we got here? We're going to be more strict on chopping things up small too. Yeah, I think that for me, that's the biggest tip I ever shared that has really helped me with my composting is to chop everything up nice and small. It really does make a big difference. Us gardeners really are good for the environment. We certainly do our bit with all the compost we make. Indeed. And I think, if we can make compost at home, the better it is for our environment. We don't have to take it to the waste where it gets, there's travel costs or travel, pollution involved in taking it to the waste. We can all do it at home and we can use it in our garden. I should actually say, we'll through these comments and what we don't add. Does anyone else have a problem with tree roots getting in? I'm having dreadful trouble with my next door sycamores. They have bases which I don't use as the bins tend to topple off. I don't have that trouble, in all honesty. In fact, when I've cut trees down, I've placed a compost bin over the stump to stop it from growing. I suspect what's happening, the sycamore roots are detecting the really nice compost that they want, and they're trying to grow up to get their roots into that compost, to get the nutrients, to get the moisture that they are after. Nature is wonderful like that. I've seen some channels claim to be able to create a usable compost in 10 days. Anyone tried this? No, I've not tried it myself. I've seen gadgets that claim that. I've not tried it myself. I'm going to look into it though. I covered my row of parsnips. Talking about growing parsnips. Wood chips. It was from my 5 large sycamores, smaller branches. Indeed. Right, I'll come back to the comments in just a moment. So I was going to say what we don't add to our compost bins. So I'm going to be a bit naughty and admit that I do add flowers and I do add roots. Uh, many gardeners will say not to add these because of a risk of it contaminating your compost in the future. In the fact that you could leave weed seeds behind and things like that. Well, what I found, because my compost bins get so hot, it kills off any seeds or any roots that might be in that compost bin. So I don't worry about that. But I do have a thermometer and I do check it quite regularly in order to see how hot it gets. Other things that I don't obviously add anything that's not going to rot down or not organic. So I'm not going to add like this. I'm not going to add that torch, believe it or not. I know it's probably a completely random thing to say, but because I add so much to my compost bins, we produce so little, I think I should say like that. Other things I don't add. Diseased material. Definitely do not add that. I'd sooner burn diseased material. And I think that's about it. I think that is about it. So literally, the only thing I don't add is diseased material and stuff that doesn't compost down. Everything else goes in. What have we got? So, Adrian, has anyone else noticed? I think there was a smell of spring in the air. Sounds funny most years. I can about air and ground heating. I know what you mean about the smell of spring, actually. Yeah, and I have noticed it. I think we're going through this sort of full spring at the moment where the weather's just warmed up slightly. Can you add wood ash to compost heaps? Yes, you can, and I add it. What I find with adding wood ash is it just adds a bit of potash to the system. Obviously, make sure your wood ash is cooled down completely before you add it. But yeah, wood ash I do add. Charles Dowden partially heats his greenhouse with a hot compost bay. Yeah, I've seen that. I know people do it, but I find like Charles Dowden, he has some large compost bins. In fact, I should say that the larger the compost bin is, the better it is. He does his. I think they're about a meter squared, or a meter cubed. Sorry. So they're large and they produce a lot of compost and a lot of heat. And he also adds and has a good supply of manure to add. I saw a YouTube channel that had a pile of wood chip next to a polytunnel and used solar fans to move the heat about. I can believe that because of how hot the wood chips do get when they're trying to rot down. They do get incredibly hot. So using it to heat a polytunnel does make sense. It's way too much effort making fast compost. This is where somebody was Digwell was asking about producing compost in 10 days. Too much effort making fast compost, but it can be done. For us, making it at any kind of scale, I'll stick to shredding, chipping, and let the microbes, then the worms do the work. Indeed. If I cut the grass, what should I do, i.e. in the time of day? I've been told not to cut the grass if there is going to be a frost. Grass is incredibly resilient. I know they say not to do it if there's going to be a frost or freezing, but I tend to cut my grass, not so much at this time of year, less, but I still cut it and it doesn't die, does it, grass? I guess the frost could cause some damage, but grass, I've got to say, is incredibly resilient. It's not the tannin in walnuts that are the problem, it is the juglone, a chemical that's bad for some plants and vegetables. Okay, so again, I've not had any experience, as I said, of that myself. I have had a walnut tree and I've added the leaves and not found that. But it was only from one small tree, so therefore not a huge problem in that regards because of how much other stuff is going in. But I think if you got a lot of walnut, from what Digwell is saying, I knew Digwell would have a good idea on this. You've got to make sure if you're going to have or use walnut leaves, you've got to try and use a minimal, I guess. I think it keeps the moisture in the drill longer. Also, I soak the drill before sowing. This is talking about the parsnips and what have you. What else have we got? Absolutely, Turbo, you are quite right. 55 degrees C is needed to kill most weed seeds. Yes, so what I see with my thermometer, my compost bin, because as I said, I chop it up and I mix it, Goes up to about 60, 70 degrees C, which they do say is too hot, but it does kill off most weed seeds. As I said, I don't get many problems with weeds growing in my compost. Cooked waste from a kitchen is a no to compost. Well, I add my cooked waste actually to my wormeries. Now, the reason that people say cooked waste is a no is because it might attract rats. But I find it goes fine. Like I said, in the wormery, it goes absolutely fine in there, so I don't worry about that. But in the but rats can't get into that. But yeah, that's something to think about. On that note, should we have a look at another one of these videos that came in from Ballycillian? We'll go for this one, I think.
And just an RV point, just like getting my beds ready early in the season. This here will be mainly my cabbage bed, and I've given it a good coating of the manure. And over the rest of the winter here, the elements take that all down. Everything will be perfect. And if need be, I'll give it a wee light dress and a compost on the top when I'm finished. So that's basically my cabbage bed.
Right, I said that was a short one. Another lovely little video. We were talking about manure, and unfortunately, I couldn't quite hear what was being said because my heater suddenly decided to kick in at that point. Let's get rid of that comment quickly. Yeah, so I like to use manure, obviously, in the compost bins. I'll add that to the compost bins. The chicken manure particularly is good for that. But I also use it as a mulch, especially around the rhubarb. I couldn't quite hear what was being said in that one, so if anybody can fill me in, that would be great. Hugh Richards advocates chop and drop. He chops up the material and spreads a thin layer on the soil surface. No need for a compost heap. Now, chop and drop, that's a permaculture method as well. I've heard of chop and drop. I like the idea of it. If the trouble I see with it when we're on an allotment, other people may not know what you're doing by chopping and dropping, and when the allotment police, I call them, come round, there's a good chance you'll get letters. But it's certainly something to think about. And all that is, you take your material and you just throw it down. In many ways, as you know, I do a lot of the mulching, especially on the allotment or the garden at home, with my chopped grass, chopped leaves. And that's effectively chop and drop as well. So I chop it up and I place it on the beds and it will rot down where it is, but it also mulches the soil. In fact, I think this is in reply to that. Digwell is saying that most of my plot waste stays on the beds, roots included. Yeah, chop and drop. It seems to be a popular way. I did it once. My rhubarb leaves. I was advised to use the rhubarb leaves as like a mulch around the base of the rhubarb plants. And I did it, but I noticed my rhubarb started discolouring, so I removed it. I don't know if anybody else has found that. I'd be interested to see that. Nice drop of muck there, Ballycillian. Indeed, yeah. It's nice to see horse manure being used, isn't it? Myself and Richard do the same by mulching beds with grass clippings, etc. Yeah. I mean, I try and produce a lot of compost because I do the no-dig gardening, and I need a lot of compost. But I believe if I can use anything else for mulching, which saves me on the weeds as well, it does make a lot of sense. And it's kind of rotting down in situ, and what doesn't get rotted when I need to clear the beds out goes into my compost bin anyway. Right, at this point, I'd just like to ask everybody, if you're enjoying this show, don't forget to like, give a thumbs up, subscribe. What else do you have to do? Click the notification, get notified whenever we go live. I can see people are liking already, which has been fantastic. So please do keep doing that. Yeah, so what have we covered so far? What we're going to use as a compost bin and the materials. Now, the other thing that I like to do, and I've mentioned this before again, I like to mix my materials. What I find is it's easy if you get a thermometer, a compost thermometer, which is quite a long, let me get that right. It's quite a long thermometer. It's in the compost bin at the moment, I'm afraid. It's quite a long one. And when the temperature starts to drop, what I then do is take either my Pitchfork or my other composting turners. So this is my Pitchfork, which I find brilliant for turning compost because you can get right in there and twist it around. Other things I use, I showed you this briefly last week, is this thing. So you stick that into the compost, and as you pull it up, they pull out and they mixes the compost well. And the other thing is like a corkscrew. I'm gonna, you was going to do that. This corkscrew, which you also, again, it just mixes around the compost nicely when you use it. I've not actually used that, to be honest, but you get the idea. So what that does is, as the compost gets hot, the microbial activity is breaking everything down. Then it loses its energy and it starts to cool. You give it a turn, it gets some oxygen in there, gets some air in there, and it also gives the materials a chance to mix up. And that kickstarts it again, and it starts to heat up as well. And that again goes on to activate the microbial activity and really produces it quite quick. Now, what some of the professional composters will say is that you need to mix it, if you want to produce it quick, about once a week or even daily in some cases to produce a quicker compost. I try and do it about once a week, but I just keep an eye on the temperature. And then after that, I'll just mix it once a week and what have you. The other thing that's quite important to add is water from time to time. If your compost is looking a little bit on the dry side, then add some water, because water is quite important to the process as well. Now, what I like to do, my open ones are down on the allotment. I grow pumpkins in those during the summer months. And because I'm watering the pumpkins, I'm naturally just watering the compost. So I don't have to worry about that so much here. The Dalek bins I have at home tend to hold on to the water because this steam doesn't have anywhere to escape. But I do keep a close eye on it, particularly if there's a lot of wood chip in the mix as well, because that holds on to the water quite well. But yeah, just a watering can, rainwater is the best stuff to use. Add it in, mix it around, and it's good to go. How do you know if it's too dry or too wet? That's a difficult one to answer. It comes from experience. Generally, if it just looks damp, then you know it's right. If it's sodden and soggy, then it's too wet. I don't generally have that problem because a lot of the water can escape from my compost bins. Yeah, I guess that kind of summarizes it up. You know, it's one of those things that you learn about as you go. So lots of thumbs up has gone. Thank you very much. What have we got? So have I said this one? Stuart Jackson, at school we get lots of fruit waste, lots of bananas. Should I reduce the amount of bananas I put in the compost bin? Thank you. That's a good question, actually. Bananas. I'm going to say no, because you can actually make a plant feed using banana skins, which has been a very popular thing to do in recent years. I've tried making it. I've never followed it through because I end up with so many different feeds. But I'm guessing if you add bananas, and I do add banana skins to my compost bins and my wormeries, all that things you would be using in the all the goodness that you use to make plant food from banana skins will be in that compost. So yeah, no, I think it's fine to add it. Rhubarb leaves laid on bed also good for trapping slugs as well. Indeed, they are. And they're quite, as you know, rhubarb leaves are quite big, and you can literally use it to cover over areas and act as a mulch. As I said, it just because my rhubarb started to discolour, like I removed it. Like, thumbs up, subscribe, buy a mug or t-shirt. As TurboStreams just reminded me as well, yes, we do sell mugs and t-shirts on our website. Or we have the Supporters Club, which I'm also told I've got to mention more in the live show. We've got a few pictures about that coming up a little bit later on. But £5 a month to become a supporting member. And each month you get a newsletter and some seeds. Providing Royal Mail delivers them in time. That's a whole other argument that I'm having at the moment. I used the rhubarb leaves after it finished to break down over winter. Yeah, I just add the rhubarbs to the compost leaves, so I chop it up. I like the corkscrew gadget. Thank you. Yeah, that corkscrew gadget came with my sub pod. I like the idea of it, but I've not actually got around to using it. I've got to get the compost out my sub pod soon. What about the insulated compost bins? That helps speed up composting. Yeah, insulated compost bins, it's holding on to that heat. And as I said earlier, the heat just helps activate and keep the microbial activity going on in the compost bin. So insulating the compost bin will help. What else? Idaho Garden Girl has joined. Good evening to you. On that note about insulating the compost bins, at winter I do see people wrapping their compost bins in blankets to try and help. I've got very mild weather where I am, so I tend not to do that. Cornish Heaven says his chickens like eating banana skins. I'll have to try that one and see what happens. Every tip out of those hot bins on the YouTube has looked wet, sticky and yucky in most cases. If the video is not sponsored, they have said it's awful. So yeah, the insulated hot bins I've seen those. I think what I know with those insulated hot bins is that it's about how it is being used. You're getting the right mix of materials. I think quite often when it's wet and sticky and yucky is described in that, it's because there's been not enough ground material to go in and soak up some of the moisture. And as I said earlier, because the hot bins, they hold on to the moisture better because it doesn't escape in steam. It does stay wet and sticky. There's a name for it. Anaerobic is a word I'm looking for. But if it does get wet and sticky, add more brown material. Terry King makes banana juice feed. No idea where he gets all his banana skins from. He obviously eats a lot of bananas. Thanks. I will now make plant food with the plant banana skins. Great lessons, I think. I think one day we're going to have to do making plant food on this live show, aren't we? Digger, Nala's garden made one himself. He said it was really good. That was a hot bin. I thought about making one myself out of an old fridge, just as an idea. Let's have a final look at this video from Ballycillian, and then I've got another video from Digwell to show a little bit later on. And I've got photos as well.
Just a wee update on the fruit cage now. Got all my blueberries all pruned and I've top dressed with ericaceous compost. That'll give them a good start to the year when the spring comes. And round behind here the raspberry bed, same again, but that's just peat-free compost. And then up above us here, what I said the last time about the way I rotate strawberries. These are the first year runners. I'll not let them flower or produce runners. They'll just grow on and then get moved down the allotment year by year.
That's fantastic, doesn't it? I love hanging strawberries. I've got some in my greenhouse as well, and they're just so much easier to look after and maintain. Plus, getting early strawberries is always a bonus in my eyes. And like Ballycillian, I take those first year strawberries, pop them into hanging baskets, get them in a greenhouse, and after that, they then go out into the garden once they have done their first year. I like to make vampire spray, as I call it, for my hostas from garlic. Great stuff. Yes. Garlic spray, great for keeping your. This is another thing we'll have to do. Make garlic spray, tomato, various plant feeds on a live show one day. Get your ideas on what we could make on that. That's what I'm going to say. Digwell, nice one, Ballycillian allotment man. Indeed, it was a great video. I do like seeing your videos from wherever you are. on these live shows. It certainly makes life a bit more interesting. So, where were we? We've got the compost. It's being made. How do we know when to empty it? Well, how I generally find, like I said, I can produce compost in about 3 months, and it's good, nice, well-broken compost. My compost bin will be full, and after that 3 months, it's reduced down by about half. But it's that beautiful black crumbly stuff that is just so easy to dig because it's all been chopped out, so light to move. You can fill a wheelbarrow up and it moves easily. So how do I know when it is all rotted down? What I like to do, because I'm tidying my compost quite regularly, when I see that there's no material left, that's when I will empty it. As simple as that, really. When it's all rotted down, that's the time I find to empty it. So yes, I think that covers on how I go about making compost. Any other tips that you've got out there that'd be good to see? Let's have a quick look at seeing what's going on. So, Thermometer, apart from generating heat, is slow compost just as good? Are we worried too much about getting the heat to heat up? So, slow compost, that's where you don't really chop everything up and you just throw it in the compost bin. And it can take a year, maybe even 2, to fully rot down. It's certainly easier to do it that way. The trouble with slow compost is that, 1, it takes a lot longer to produce compost, and 2, it may not get rid of any weed seeds and stuff like that. So I prefer hot composting for that very reason. That's the only negatives I would say with slow composting. And it's also, I find it's harder to mix because it's in big quantities. Let's get you in the kitchen making up some remedies. Yes, one day we'll get me in the kitchen. Well, I'm always in the kitchen. It's just not always with the camera going. Turbo Stream is saying that Ballysoon's plot is well organised. It certainly is that. And do the chilies from the club seeds take longer than the rest to germinate? Only ones I've sown that haven't shown any signs yet. So the chili seeds were from December, if I remember correctly. Yes, they have been quite slow, I've got to say. Mine have started to germinate, but they have been very, very slow. Steve, good evening. Late joining this evening. Good topic. This morning I've been cutting back buddleia and shredding. The resulting fine brown and green clippings will go on the compost. Indeed. Leaf mold is slow compost. Which, that takes a year or 2. So that's an example of slow composting as well. How long, from Rebecca, would you say composting takes from start to finish? It does depend. For me, from start to finish is about 3 months. That's from an empty compost bin to it being full, to it rotting down and being able to use. 3 months in the middle of summer. This time of year, slightly longer, 4 or 5 months. We also have less material to go around. But if you're doing slow composting, you're looking a year, maybe 2. Hope that helps. It's a bit more work for hot composting. You have to chop everything up, but it does produce results quicker and better, in my opinion. Amanda Joy has joined. Sorry to have missed the show. I'm going to save it for my lunchtime seed sowing tomorrow. Hope you're all well and have a good week. Lovely to see you, Amanda, anyway. Now, I know Amanda has sent me some photos. So should we have a quick look at these photos before carrying on? So what have we got here? As you can see, I've been a bit creative today with what we have. So first of all, this came in from Amanda. And she's been busy on the allotment today. This is what she started with. And this is what she's been doing, milled in a compost bin, which seems to tally up with what we've been saying. She's given it a paint, as you can see there, and that is the resulting compost. Looks fantastic, doesn't it? Great to see the 3 compost bays 3 pallets into a compost bay being used nicely. Next, we have from Stuart Jackson. He's been sowing the Aubergine Black Beauty, which we sowed on last week's Grow Along, didn't we? He's also been sowing some other seeds from this month and some from last month, I think. And here they are, showing signs of germination, his seeds. Ian McGorgan, I think he's out there tonight. He's been sowing some radish microgreens. As you can see, here they are growing. He's got his potatoes chitting nicely on the windowsill. I've got to go and sort my potatoes out. You'll hear that on the podcast tomorrow. And here we are. He's sown some more radish seeds to use as microgreens. Now, Toby Oxford last week joined and he shared his photo with his rhubarb just starting to spring into life. Seems to be happening all over the place. Globe artichokes also springing into life, as you can see here. And his peas broad beans, are growing nice and strong. Now, as always, I like to finish off with a joke from Ian Beddoes because, well, why not? And here we have a picture. The bloke is saying there's loads of slugs all over the lawn. Woman's saying, get some salt. And his husband turns around and says, bloody hell, Susan, you'll eat anything. I think you might have got it slightly wrong there, don't you? So what about blighted potato leaves? Should you or shouldn't you pop them in? Opinions seem to differ. Yeah, I know there's a lot of opinion on that. So I've looked into this in a lot of detail. What I understand is that blight seems to only live on living material. So I tend to, again, chop all my blighted material up and throw it in the compost bin. But I know even if I didn't do that, I would get blight every year. I live in a blight. It's just a bad place for blight. Every year, regardless of what I do, I will get blight. Now, what I'm going to caveat that with saying is that they do say blight survives in the soil, which is how we get blight. I don't know whether that's true or not. I'm no expert. And that's why people say to burn blighted material. But if you've ever burnt it, it stinks. It absolutely stinks. So in all honesty, I personally do compost blighted material. Again, I know my compost gets so hot, so I see that as potentially eradicated blighted material. But it may not be the right thing to do. But I know, regardless, I will get blight every year, regardless of what happens. Idaho, I use 45-gallon garbage cans as compost generators. Since I don't dump it out and turn it, it takes a year. I did thus use this method to eliminate harbouring rodents. That's a good point, actually. Yes, sometimes you may get rats in your compost bins, and by turning them regularly or every day hitting the bin as well, that seems to scare them off. They do have a tendency to nest in compost bins, particularly on allotments, but in all honesty, I don't see so much of a problem with them. Now, Digwell says, I don't use a compost bin's contents until the next year. So he gives it a year to rot down, which is probably a good way and a safe way to do it. Again, I've just find I want to produce so much compost that I have to use it up as and when it's available. The compost ball looks good, but it's very heavy to push around the fields. I would not recommend it for a single person because you need to help roll it. So we were discussing this earlier about a compost ball that you rotate to mix up the compost. But I have seen some that are like on almost like a seesaw frame that you just rotate. Looks easy to use. Certainly turns it easy. Oh, look at those rhubarb. Awesome. My ground is frozen hard. That rhubarb does look really nice, doesn't it? I've got a bin over one of mine because I'm forcing the rhubarb, but it's starting to show itself. My rhubarb is starting to sprout too up in Birmingham. Yeah, it's going to be another good year for rhubarb, I think. Blight is airborne and only thrives on living material. No problem in composting, from Digwell. That's my kind of philosophy as well. It does. I do feel it is a problem, blight, but I get it every year, so whatever it says. When blight strikes, they tell you to cut the harms off the potatoes, but don't dig potatoes up to 14 days, as the blight dies in the soil after 14 days. There you go. I did not actually know that. What I've always done, I've just cut the harms down, and then I've given it 2 weeks before I've dug them up anyway. So I didn't know that blight dies in the soil after 14 days. Makes sense. It does make sense. Although I believe my understanding with blight, and I've looked into this, it's a bit of a headache when you try and find answers out for this, is that blight does live in the soil because that's how it gets splashes onto our plants. But I could be wrong on that. I'm no blight expert. I just read a lot about it and go from there. If anybody does want to find out, or the best thing I found to get plenty of warnings about blight is there's a website, I forget what it's called, blightwatch.co.uk or blightwatch.com. They just send me an email alert every time blight is expected to appear in my area, because there's certain conditions that have to be met for blight. And there's no, as far as I'm aware, no real treatment for blight anymore either. So yes. Now, one other thing I want to say about compost when we produce compost. We often think of the compost that we buy from our garden centres and use that to be the same thing as what's produced. That's technically not quite right. Because if we want to use the compost that we produce to grow things in, we need to mix in some garden soil, just a bit of loam, just to add a bit of structure to it. Which is why the compost material is great to use as like a mulch, or on top of the beds, or on top of pots. But as a growing medium, it's not quite the same as the compost we buy. It's close, just not quite the same. And that's why you often hear people talk about compost mixes, where they'll add their own homegrown compost, they'll add some garden soil, they may add some leaf mold and various other things to build this growing media up. But as I say, I use my compost as a mulch. I'll use it to build my compost levels up in my compost bins, and I will use it also to top off my pots when I need to add a bit more compost to them. Blight does not splash up. It is airborne, and it settles in wet droplets in the leaves. Yes, it is a confusing one, this blight, because some people will say it splashes up from the soil. Others say it settles on wet droplets. My understanding is that it's actually in the water, in the rain. And what happens is when the rain lands and it lands on the soil, and then it warms up, that the humidity, the water becomes, it increases the humidity around the plants, and that produces or causes the plant to catch blight. That's how I understand it. But like I say, it is a very complicated thing to get our head around. So I've just put the link up if anybody wants to join in and zap themselves in, or you can call in on 07307 135 174. But I've got one more video that I want to show, and this comes in from Digwell.
Okay then, here we are at the leaf and ground allotment site. Apologies for the sound quality because I haven't brought my microphone with me. Anyway, so here's the bottom tier of allotments. There's a middle tier there. Mine's the one with all the yellow bits sticking in at the far end. And the other tier, the top tier, is up there, just below the fence. And like I said, we're not allowed compost bins because there is a communal compost bin. And here it is right behind me. Spin you around slowly so you don't get dizzy. And we have 4 massive bays, 2.5 by 2.5 by 1.5 meters each. Huge! But as you can probably see, it's not been looked after, not been managed. You know, we should have started off with, say, that one there, and then that one got turned into that one, and so on and so on and so on. But all it is now is a festering mass of putrid green stuff. I mean, it's got so bad that people can't even get close enough to put things in. So they just dump it on the side. Let me show you, hang on. Try not to slip in the muck. See, look, there's as much outside the bins as there is in. In fact, there's probably more. Crazy. We've been asked not to put cardboard and paper in. So the result of that is there's very little brown matter. And because there's very little brown matter, it's not heating up and rotting down as it should do. And it's been so poorly managed, if you like. Look, there's a bit of green string there. Oh, try not to step in any slippery stuff. Dock leaves are growing, dock weeds are growing in it, look. It's the prominent weed on our site is the dock. So there's probably full of dock seeds, which are viable for 80 years, as you all know. So when anyone uses this compost, they'll have docks. Oh, and there we are, look, a piece of compost bag over there. Compost bag. So we got plastic in there, we got all sorts. Oh, plant labels there. Primulas, I'm pretty sure they weren't on the allotment site. Sad really, and even the groundkeeper can't get close enough to put the grass in. So the grass clippings are an even bigger festering mass at the side here. Upsetting really, but there you are. Yeah. Such potential. Yeah, well.
That's all I can say on that. It's a sigh. You know, communal compost bins are great, providing they're managed. And that example is what happens when it doesn't get managed. It just becomes a dumping ground, and it's not good to look at, and it's not really doing anyone any favours. You've got some nice big compost bins there. I should say, the bigger the compost bin, the better compost it produces, or the faster and the hotter it gets, so it produces better compost. But when it's like that, it just cannot be used. Now, I know in Brighton, Brighton is quite a green city, as no doubt anybody knows. But they actually have communal composts in some of the parks, and they're scattered all over the city. And what they are, they're local, or people who are part of this communal compost group. They take their materials, they put it in the bin that is unlocked, and then there's allocated people who do the maintenance work. And what they do when that compost bin is full, they'll pop the lock back over it and open one of the others that might be empty. And they're also responsible for turning it and everything else. That is where communal composting falls down. It requires people to actually be involved and get stuck in and do it, which, as we all know, is not an easy job to do at the best of times. So yeah, I'm a little bit ashamed to see that, and I feel sorry for Digwell about that, because we could, as a country, we should, I believe, or as a human species, should be doing a lot more composting. It's one of those things that is so important, and everyone can do it in their garden if you've got a garden, and if you haven't, then the council could be doing a communal composting system somewhere. But of course, humans by their very nature are lazy. Back to the comments. So Oracle is saying blight is like Christmas, comes every year, then everyone is running around going mad. Has anyone along been blight free for a year? Certainly not me, not in recent years. When I was a child and gardening, yes, I was blight free back then, but not these days. And I know it's going to come. That's why I grow blight resistant varieties, and I stick with that. And that's the best way I find to beat blight resistant varieties. So balancing blight travels in the air during humid weather. The spores that fall on the ground can't live in the ground. The soil is clear after 14 days. Indeed it is. Septoria, which is very like early blight, does splash up. Indeed. Sad, great bins going to waste. Indeed it is. Adrian says, could you not spray the docks with Roundup? And I think I'm in a camp that tries not and doesn't use weed killer. I know dock is a problem, but I also believe with regular hoeing and digging out the roots, you will beat it. Stuart, that's such a shame about the compost bays. Maybe it should be a day with all the people working together to put it right. And allow cardboard. You know, you need brown material. Cardboard is such a useful resource for the gardener. Cardboard should be there. Those bins need a front to hold them in the containers. Digger does say that no weed killer is allowed, and a roof to hold in. I agree, yeah. It's Adrian, but I don't like to use chemicals on the plot, but I'm not totally, but try to be as organic as possible. Other half, I suppose, the only answer is to get someone with a mech digger to dig it out. Yeah, or when it comes to things like that, what I find is no dig does work because it keeps constantly smothering the leaves and constantly getting the hoe working through it. A plant will only survive if it's got leaves to photosynthesize. If you're constantly cutting off the leaves, never letting it photosynthesize, those roots will die. But you've got to be on that hoe every day, maybe even twice a day, to really stop it from happening. Turbostrip say they spent a few quid making the bins, so why not maintain them? What a waste! Indeed, what a waste! Maintain them, and also it's such a compost is such a valuable resource. We pay a fortune for composting to be delivered when it can be produced in our gardens. No dig is the only way to go. I agree. I think you can kill dogs with MCPA, which is a type of weed killer. Again, I think many of us now are in the camp that we try not to use weed killers. I actually do believe there's a space for weed killers in extreme circumstances, but in most cases, weed killers should not be used. It's so sad to see the bins like that. In that state, sorry, from Alison. I agree. So sad to see the bins in that state. So, just quickly, I think I asked this earlier, but I'm going to say it again. Don't forget to give us a like. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to follow. Don't forget to click the bell notification to know when we go live and all that jazz. Gotta say that, otherwise I get told off. I think now I've said it twice. I definitely won't get told off. But it does make you think. You know, composting is composting for me. I'm going to start summarising it up as we close off this week's show. Composting for me is so important to the gardener. We all compost, we all produce the waste, and we all use compost. So if we can produce it for free, and we are able to produce it for free, we should be doing it. Added to that, it's better for the environment because that waste doesn't then get transported to here, there, and everywhere. And we don't have to import the waste either. One of the things that annoys me about buying bags of compost is that it comes in plastic bags. And we can use the plastic bags, of course, for growing things like potatoes in. But I see that as being a little bit wasteful again. It's a fossil fuel used to produce plastic. So let's try and think about these things a little bit better. And communal composting is also something that I'm quite interested in. I've got to go and meet up with the people in Brighton about the communal composting for a podcast. Talking of the podcast, on the podcast tomorrow, we've got a couple of little bits. So first of all, obviously got a diary section, but I've also gone to a garden centre to buy some seed potatoes, and I've had a question come in about crop rotation and whether it's worth doing, because there's a lot of mixed advice on crop rotation. And in fact, that's something I want to talk about next week, crop rotation. So tomorrow on the podcast I'll be discussing my thoughts on it, but on Sunday's next week's live show I want to hear your thoughts on crop rotation, whether you think it's worth doing, whether you do it and whether it's achievable. Just another thing that has come in that I think is an interesting discussion. Digwell says, we are not allowed any weed killers. Yeah, I think there's a lot of allotments like that out there nowadays. Weed killer does have a place. I've got to say, weed killer does have a place, but in extreme cases. Has anyone tried those bokashi compost buckets? No, I haven't, is my answer. Anybody else out there that may have tried them? I've heard about them. They're meant to be able to be used underneath the sink, produce compost quite quickly, but I've not tried it myself. And I think for me, I found them to be a bit too small when I've looked at them. There may be something I'll look at in the future. We'll see what happens. But Digwell is saying that I've tried one. It lasted a month before the smell got to me. So that's what I was worried about. The smell of the bokashi bins probably won't last. I might look into it in the future and try and get one and see what it's like. Stuart Jackson's had to head off. See you all next week. See you next week, Stuart. All the best. But yeah, the bokashi bins, I've heard about them. I think they're great if you do live in a flat. But again, you've got to pull up with a smell. Now, for me personally, I like the wormeries. They don't give off a smell unless they are sitting in the liquid and they're not drained off regularly. I find them just to be a little bit too good to be true. I'm going to grow all my new potatoes in 35-litre tubs with my homemade compost from last year. Should save me a fortune on buying compost. The risk, it's going to be a good experiment, but the risk with that is the soil, the compost might be a little bit too rich and you might end up with scab. But let us know how you get on. It'd be interesting to see. When I spoke to a potato growing expert, and this was more with well-rotted manure, he sort of said you probably get scab, and that was true. But he recommended just adding a bit of soil into it, just to mix it up and try and reduce the amount of scab. But give it a try. Give it a try and let us know how you get on, Graham. I'd be interested to see whether it does produce a lot of scab. Toby Stream has never heard of those buckets. Something to look at. My pot has a lot of sheep poo on for several years now, mostly rotted, but lots of nettles, etc. It will need rotivating, but first I will spray with Roundup to kill the nettles. Obviously, it's if you're going to use Roundup, it's your garden. You do what you want to do. But my advice, if you've got nettles, rotivating it may make those roots, chop those roots up small and make it worse. But I guess if you're killing it off with weed killer, there's probably not going to be any roots left in the ground anyway. So rotivating that will be okay. But just bear in mind, either don't get the hoe out working, try not to use a weed killer, but just bear in mind that rotivating may make it worse because it chops up all those roots and spreads them about. That being said, as I said, weed killer will probably kill the roots and stop it from happening. Nettles can be great for wildlife. I do agree, actually. The wildlife area I have on the plot does have nettles growing for that very reason. Butterflies are particularly fond of nettles. And I don't know if anybody's ever tried eating nettles. They are quite tasty. They make a nice soup. Just to add to that, Adrian from Digwell, if you rotivate, then you will just bring up new weed seeds from the poo as well. Mind you, if it's well rotted, I don't know how long it's been since the sheep have been on that area. If it's well rotted, there's probably the weed seeds have already come up. Adrian does say Roundup will kill down to roots. Yes, it will do. It certainly will do that. Nettles are great on compost heaps. They are. They actually are very good at producing or making your own homegrown plant food as well. I remember when I was a kid at school, I was told that, and I got a little bottle, filled it up with nettles and water, left it on the windowsill for months until the water, there was literally nothing of the nettles left, and the water had just turned this fluorescent green. And I used that to feed a lot of my little plants in, and it was a fantastic little feed. Rebecca goes on to say, and they make a great plant food. I know what a lot of people will do is get almost like a watering butt, fill that up with water, and then put into a load of nettles in like not a sleeping bag, a pillowcase. And it produces a fantastic plant food for free, which is very good for encouraging plants to produce a good root system. So it's good for that, I find. Stock up and round up, as it will be off. Excuse me. We'll stock up and round up, as it will be off the shelves soon. I believe Adrian, being a farmer, might be able to get hold of it for a bit longer than most of us. So here we are. We're coming up to the end of the show. We've got 3 minutes to go. So I just want to say, we've learned a lot today about composting, haven't we? Or I feel we have. It's something I do believe we should all be doing. I think a lot of us out there now are probably going to give composting more of a go. My top tip, and I think everyone out there seems to agree with me, chopping it up does produce a quicker, faster, better compost. But if you can't chop it up, then it just takes longer, and you can do cold composting, which involves using the worms to do the work. Add whatever you can get hold of, except for disease materials, and if you're cold composting, no roots and no flowers or seeds, and no weeds. Cardboard, if you can get hold of plenty of cardboard, is a great thing for your wood materials, as is sawdust, wood chip, wood shavings, anything like that. Rebecca's saying, I can't get enough nettles. I have so many uses. My hubby takes nettle drops. They're amazing for prickly heat. Interesting. Yeah, the nettles is got a lot of uses, it has to be said. Mulch with cardboard if there isn't too big. The roots will add the soil structure when they die off. That's exactly how I make a nettle feed, pillowcase fed with nettles. What is the topic for next week? Well, as I said, I want to discuss a bit more about crop rotation and find out about whether you crop rotate or how you do it, or whether you don't crop rotate. Basically, because I'm discussing it on the podcast tomorrow, but I want to get a bit of feedback from you guys as well about it. Anybody, by the way, I want suggestions for subjects to have on these live shows. Keep them coming in. Anybody has ideas, and don't forget, please do send me your videos, just like Digwell has done and has Ballycillian. Videos are great. Just create your video, head to WeTransfer.com and send it to me, richard@theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk. And it doesn't have to be about crop rotation. Any video that I can play, as long as it's to do with gardening, is fantastic, because it breaks things up a little bit for me. And also your photos. Don't forget to send in your photos or anything you want to add. And potentially, even if you want to be a guest on the show, you are more than welcome to do that as well. Again, my email address, richard@veggrowerpodcast.co.uk. Ernie is saying a big thanks to you and your viewers for the much needed tip on how to improve your compost. Indeed, it's been a good show and a good conversation. In my village, you can go one Saturday morning and fill up reusable bags for £1. Oh, what, with compost? That's a good idea. That is a very good idea. Digwell, thank you. What can I use when it goes? That's talking about the roundup and the way roundup's been finished. Anyway, it is now just gone 7:30. Digwell's off. Take care, guys. See you next week. And I think it is time for me to close up and get out of here as well. Thanks so much for joining me. It's been fantastic to chat again. Fantastic to see you all. We will be back again next Sunday at 6, where we will do it all again. So until then, please take care, and I'll see you then. Let's go. Ta-ta.